we're expecting an improvement in your growth of maybe 5 or 10% using lengthened partials versus full range of motion.
You might be thinking, oh, what's that? A half a pound or 1 pound of muscle? It is very significant. A 5 to 10% gain is huge in the world of bodybuilding. Coach Greg, in today's video, we're going over new research on the best way to build muscle. Up until this time, people have thought that going through a full range of motion during a repetition was the best way to create muscle hypertrophy, and that is to build extra muscle. But new research, and it's not just one study, it's not being cherry-picked, shows that it's not full range of motion, that there is in fact a better way. And so by the end of this video, we're going to give you training tips, training techniques to incorporate this so that you can add it to your training repertoire, incorporate it into your workouts. And so it's not going to be complicated. You'll know exactly what to do by the end of the video. Rarely do I watch a video where I've learned something completely new that I'd never once thought of. But I'm watching a video by Jeff Nippert. It's titled The World's Smartest Intensity Technique for Muscle Growth. And I'm thinking, wow, this is very interesting. And so after watching my video, go check out Jeff's so you can learn even more. The more you watch, the more you will learn.
Out of all the intensity techniques in the world, one has, by far, the most science behind it. It's actually a technique called long length partials.
By that, it means that you're doing partial reps about half of the range of motion, and you're doing it at the part where the bicep, the tricep, the calf, whatever muscle you're talking about, is being stretched the most. And so, for example, if doing bicep curls, this would be the portion where it's being stretched the most. Up here, it's being squeezed the most. This is the stretch. This is the squeeze. And this same mentality applies to every single muscle. If you're doing the bench press, you have to go from the bottom on the chest, that's where the chest is being stretched. You can literally feel the stretch when you do it, up until halfway up.
On lat pull downs, a long length partial would look like this, where you only go about halfway down to your chest. And again, that's because the lats are more stretched at the top with the arms up overhead.
So essentially, when you're doing your repetitions, you don't really need to go to a full extension to build the muscle properly. We once thought that you had to go through a full range of motion, but turns out that only going halfway up can in fact get equal gains, if not greater, than going through the full range of motion.
As of now, there are 8 studies comparing long length partials to short length partials, and 7 of those 8 studies found that long length partials were better for muscle growth.
And so consider there's been 8 studies on this exact phenomena, the short range versus the long range. And out of the 8 studies, 7 out of 8 showed that the long range was in fact better. And the other study, well, there was no difference. And so that is very conclusive evidence. Think of it, 7 out of 8 and 8, it was essentially a tie.
But it gets even better because we now also have 5 studies comparing a full range of motion to long length partials, and 4 of those 5 studies found that long length partials were better for muscle growth than a full range of motion.
And so think of it, out of all these studies, there are none that show that full range of motion is better than partial range of motion. And remember, it's important to do the stretching part, the part at the bottom. If you're just doing partials at the top, you're not going to make the same amount of gains. Now, how does this apply to the average lifter? Well, if you're a newbie and you're just going to the gym, you've only been training for a year, you're a beginner. I don't suggest that you do this. This is an advanced training technique. You do not need to do this. This is something you should only consider once you have experience in the gym, you've learned how to properly train and exercise, and you're no longer experiencing gains.
They're overthinking everything. It's like all these stupid little notions of what's going on in the exercises that don't matter. Lift the freaking weight and put the freaking weight down.
Think of it, if your training right now is working for you, why would you start doing this? It's already working. But if you hit a plateau, or you're an advanced lifter and you're trying to shock the body into new and better gains, this is something you should absolutely try in perhaps every single workout. And there are essentially 2 ways you could do this. You could literally say, I'm going to do one set of perhaps 15 reps and only go halfway up. You're on the bench press and you're pressing the weight and you're going halfway up. Why use the full range of motion when half the range can give equal, if not better gains? But remember, you need to have a spotter. If you're doing 15 reps at the bottom and you're finished and you say, oh, it's time to re-rack the weight, you might not be able to finish it. You're at the weakest part of the range of motion, and so perhaps you won't have the strength to re-rack the weight, and so it is in fact dangerous. And so on any exercise that you're doing this, please use a spotter. Another example for the squat, if you're doing 15 reps at the bottom part of the motion, you may not have the strength to get up after doing 15 reps. And you may be thinking this is going to be easy. Doing 15 reps at the bottom, that's way easier than doing 15 full range of motion reps. But the truth is, it's actually harder. I've trained like this in the past. I didn't know it was better, just something I wanted to do. For example, on the leg press, you're doing 15 reps halfway up, and it's harder. The muscles being stretched, you're at the extreme range of motion, and it's constantly feeling like extreme tension on the muscle. You don't get that rest and recovery after doing every single rep. Think of it. When you're standing there between reps, you're literally resting. It's easy. Every rep, you get to the bottom and you're thinking, wow, that's going to be hard at the bottom, but then it gets easier at the top. But in this training, every second of your lift, it's going to be the hard part. The bottom, this is the hard part. And so in actuality, this kind of training is actually harder. It may be quicker, it may not have the same time under tension, but it's actually going to be more difficult, especially if you're training to failure. Think of how hard it is to constantly be doing partial reps in the greatest extreme range of motion and do every rep until failure. Very, very difficult. And the second way, of which many of you have likely tried this in the past, is when you get to failure, you continue to do extra reps. You're doing lat pull downs, and after 10 reps, you can't pull the bar down to your neck. You simply don't have the strength. But you don't stop, you don't feel all that fatigued, and you continue to do perhaps 5 reps more. You're going halfway down. Perhaps you may only go 1/3 of the way down and eventually say, yeah, I've had enough. That is a long-range partial rep that you're doing naturally while doing pull-downs. And so those repetitions, according to science, are in fact equal and or better than doing the full range of motion. And so the next time you do a set of lat pull-downs and you perhaps get to failure, think, I'm not going to stop yet. I'm going to add a few more reps. Partial reps, perhaps halfway down. That added intensity technique is a form of progressive overload. If you've only been going for 10 reps until you're tired, fatigued, you can't get another good rep in good form, and you add in partial reps at the end, you're going harder. You're training harder. Progressive overload. Train harder than last time. And so by using these long length partials, you can progressive overload harder than last time for years.
So if you're all about maximizing your hypertrophy, that's meaningful. At this point, I'm pretty confident that lengthened partials are something that should be included in your training.
And remember, this is for hypertrophy, and that means to build muscle. I'm not saying you should do this for strength. If you're a power lifter or you're really focused on strength gains, you don't want to do partial range of motion. You need to do the actual lift. If you're a bench press specialist and all you do is half reps, you really need to also work on the top range of motion. If you're squatting, deadlifting, please work the full range of motion. Although I'm not saying you can't add this as a training technique, you want to do full range of motion if you are in fact a competitive power lifter.
We're expecting an improvement in your growth of maybe 5 or 10% using lengthened partials versus full range of motion.
And so how much better could this type of training be? Well, they're saying it could add 5 to 10% more muscle. And so think of it. If you train like this for perhaps a year, 100% natural, and you gain 5 pounds of muscle, you could in fact gain 1/4 to 1/2 pound of muscle more. That is significant. And if you think of it over the course of several years, perhaps you gain 10 pounds of muscle, you could be adding in 1/2 to 1 pound of extra muscle by using this training technique into your training. You might be thinking, oh, what's that? 1/2 pound or 1 pound of muscle. It is very significant. A 5 to 10% gain is huge in the world of bodybuilding. And one supplement I would highly suggest if you're trying to get greater endurance, trying to push your workouts harder than last time, it's GO2 Max, the main ingredient NMN shown in research. All you have to do is type about NMN. You'll know all about it, just how good this is. It's the main ingredient. It adds to your endurance, your recovery. You can go harder than ever before. Perhaps you felt fatigued after 45 minutes. You can keep going. It's giving you more energy, more stamina. Highly suggest you pick up GO2 Max, and don't forget code Greg, 10% off.
You'll reach a point where you can't get the weight all the way down. Now, most science-based lifters will stop the set once they can no longer get the bar all the way down to their chest, but your back actually has quite a bit of gas left in the tank if you were to keep going with partial reps.
And so as Jeff sets on many exercise, science-based lifters, remember, when people overdo the science, they are in fact missing out on some things that people consider bro science. For example, lat pull down. Science says they do between 1 to 3 reps of failure. Keep a few reps in reserve. Don't go to failure. RIR this and perceived rep exertion that and blah, blah, blah. But remember, the bro trainers, those who have been in the gym for years, always knew, hey, training to failure and training hard for an advanced lifter, that is very important. And so how many of you out there who are advanced lifters, raise your hand, never do partial reps at the end of a lat pull down? You simply lift strict technique up and down till failure. You can't get it down anymore and you stop. That's easy. Training to failure without doing partials for a lat pull down is easy. Yeah, I said it is very easy. And so when I'm training lat pull downs, if I don't push past failure, I call that a wussy set. I didn't go hard. And so what the science is saying is those partial reps are actually more important than the full range of motion reps. And so if you've been training that way, especially for an advanced lifter, you're going to get greater gains, perhaps 5 to 10%. Now, if you're a beginner, you shouldn't be training that hard. You don't need it. And so depending on the training stage that you're in, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, that will dictate how much of these advanced training techniques you're using. If you're a beginner, you don't need any of them. You should be focused on training technique, your form, just getting the basics. But if you're an intermediate and getting into an advanced lifter, absolutely, you should be trying advanced training techniques. Jeff demonstrates how this can be done on almost any muscle that you're training. Lying down hamstring curls, rarely would I be able to go through the full range of motion for every single rep. Once I'm at 10 reps, I cannot get a full range of motion, but I don't feel I've worked hard enough. And so I do partials. And those partials are at the bottom or in the stretch position. And so you just keep going. Depending on if you're intermediate or advanced, perhaps you just do 1 more. If you're advanced, perhaps you do 5 more. It depends. You might do 20 more. Everyone could potentially use this technique, but I highly suggest beginners, you wait until you're an intermediate or advanced lifter.
As a slightly different technique, you can try something called integrated partials, where rather than leaving all your lengthened partials until the end of the set, you can sprinkle them in throughout the set. I've been doing these on the pec deck.
And so Jeff points out another way that you can do this. For example, in the pec deck, you do a full range of motion. This next set, a half rep. Then you go and do a full range of motion and back into a half rep. And so there are perhaps an infinite number of ways that you could actually incorporate this. You could perhaps do the first 8 reps partials, the last 2 reps full range of motion, the first 2 full range of motions, the last 8 partials. You can do whatever you want, but please experiment, find what works for you. You can try it on certain exercises and skip it altogether on others. Remember, if you never use this technique ever in your life, it's still okay. You're still getting the majority of the gains. And I'm sure that depending on the individual, some people experience more gains than others. Everyone's genetics are different. Perhaps if you always did partial reps, you might get worse gains. Perhaps your body just works like that. For others, they might get way better gains. It's how it works. And so depending on your genetics, how you like to train, how you enjoy to train, this may or may not be the most enjoyable training method for you. Subscribe, click the bell button, like the video if you like it. Don't forget about Harder Than Last Time clothing line. Also, the Harder Than Last Time supplements, including the Seco protein bars. They taste amazing. Various pre-workouts, creatine, you name it, we got it. Head over to the website, Coach Greg, 10% off. Don't forget to watch 2 of those 2 bloops. Did you subscribe yet? And did you like the video? And of course, we always have the cookbooks, the training books, Circle, Diet Book, Life Circle, how to lose weight, keep it off for the rest of your life. And until next time, I'm out.